Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for the next part of my one-turn playthrough of the Battle of the Eastern Solomons scenario from Guadalcanal. Now when I left you at the end of the last video, the US had just carried out a joint carrier and land-based bomber airstrike on the hugely unfortunate Japanese convoy force. And while they didn't manage to wreak a great deal of havoc among the Japanese destroyers, only sinking two of them, they scored a major strategic victory by sinking all four of the Japanese troop transports, a very serious blow to Japanese plans. I am, of course, very conscious that having left you halfway through the air attack phase, I owe you guys two airstrikes. And the ones that are developing next are the US also launched strikes against the Ryujo's battle group. And on the other side of the coin, the Japanese strike force launched its own air attack against an American formation, which they are still very puzzled about, having been variously told, if you remember the scouting reports from the last video, could comprise of a force of either 5 ships or 20 ships, but the number is obviously uncertain, and so is the type of vessel. So the Japanese are taking a bit of a chance, but the other problem they have is, despite the many scouting aircraft they have in the air, the only naval target of any kind that they've been able to identify is in that hex. So come hell or high water, they've decided they're just going to go for it. Now, because the Japanese are side A, they get to decide which of these two attacks develops first. And they've decided, really because they want to get the bad news over with more than anything else, is that they want the blow that's going to land on Ryujo and her consorts to land first. So I'm going to move to the battle board again, as I did yesterday. And we have two separate US strikes coming in. One of them is the lone torpedo aircraft, or torpedo squadron, I should say. I think they came from the Saratoga. And the other one is the Enterprise's strike package, which is a bit more comprehensive, comprising two groups of Dauntlesses and more torpedo bombers. So I'm just going to head over to the tactical map. Let's get in close again like we did yesterday. And let me find poor old Ryujo's attack group. So there she is, Ryujo herself. The cruiser Tone, I think I will place over there. See if I can group some decent covering fire for her. And I will put her escorting destroyers down here. Now, with the two groups of US aircraft, again, because they were launched separately, we've got Saratoga's torpedo bombers, and we've got Enterprise's slightly more complete attack package. So I'm going to roll the black dice for the Saratoga group and the red for Enterprise. Right, so Saratoga got a 6 and Enterprise's group got a 9. So Saratoga's torpedo bombers are going to attack first. Now, unfortunately, poor Ryujo, because her planes are still being dealt with in her hangar, does not have a combat air patrol up. So this is going to be quite an easy one for the United States. And I'm just going to set their attack up. Now, because of the positioning of the Japanese destroyers, the US torpedo bombers really don't want to place themselves there. In fact, because they don't have enough torpedo planes to make an anvil attack, you get bonuses if you have a torpedo plane attacking there from off the bow and another torpedo plane squadron attacking from the opposite side. But then if you're on your own, it's best to just come in at an angle that allows you to avoid as much flak as possible. So Saratoga's torpedo planes, very sensibly, are actually going to come in from that direction. And what that means in practice is that other than contributing a lot of sound and fury, neither Tone nor the destroyers can actually fire at them effectively. So it's all going to be down to Ryujo's flak. And her flak rating is 2, and the defensive rating of the US bombers is 2, so it's a straight roll-off between the two sides. Ooh, the Japanese roll a 1 and the US roll a 6, so Ryujo bangs away at the incoming planes, but nothing happens. None of them are downed. Maybe a few of them are made to feel a bit uncomfortable, but that's about the worst of it. And having come into range, the US dropped their torpedoes. Attack rating of 5 versus Ryujo's defensive rating of 2. So the US has rolled a 3 for a total of 8. And whoop, and the big black cat has just joined me. And the Japanese have rolled a 5 for a total of 7. No, Oscar. No. Sorry, my co-pilot is misbehaving. So the US have won by 1, which means that Ryujo has suffered a minor hit, or it could be a very near miss from a torpedo prematurely detonating. Either way, her hull plates are probably sprung. And that's it. The US aircraft have successfully conducted their attack and are able to break for home. Now the Enterprises group arrives. So they've got 2 dive bombers with very powerful attack ratings of 7. Ooh, whoops, sorry, the cat. With attack ratings of 7. And I think the best thing to do would be to have one of them make an overhead attack on the Ryujo, and the others will try and distract the Tone by launching an attack on her. Unfortunately, like Saratoga, Enterprise hasn't got nearly as many torpedo bombers as they would like, but they're going to repeat the tactic that worked so well for Saratoga's group and come in from off the quarter. So yes, so now it's up to the Japanese to distribute their anti-aircraft fire. By the nature of how they attack, the dive bombers have to make themselves vulnerable to the destroyers. So the destroyers are going to add the weight of their fire to Ryujo to try and knock those dive bombers down. They're taking a big risk in ignoring the torpedo planes, but after Midway, I think you'd be hard put to find any Japanese who would argue that dive bombers are not the greater threat. So the Japanese are going to open fire with a strength of 2. Normally it would be 2 plus 3, but because of the damage, Ryujo's anti-aircraft rating is reduced by 1. So it is 2 versus 2. Oof, the Japanese have rolled a 10 for 12, and the US has rolled a 4 for 6. Now, the US is not sure they like that. They would really like their dive bombers to attack at full strength. So they're going to commit the free roll marker and force a re-roll. Still not great. The Japanese have rolled a 4, so that gives them a total of 6. But the US has rolled a 2, which gives them a total of 4. That's a little bit better. So the incoming dive bomber squadron maybe loses a plane or 2, but nothing significant. They've just taken a hit. Of course, no fire, as I say, is directed at the torpedo planes. And Tone, I'd already decided, because of the threat posed by those incoming dive bombers, Tone is going to fire at them and leave the carrier to shift for herself. So she has an AA rating of 2. The dive bombers have a defensive rating of 2. The Americans rolled a 7 and the Japanese rolled a 5. So Tone's anti-aircraft guns do nothing to her opponents. So again, just to build up a bit of tension, let's do the dive bombing attack on Tone first. So Enterprise has some formidable dive bombers, so Bombing 6 is going in with an attack rating of 7 versus Tone's defense of 3. And the Americans have rolled a 3 for a total of 10. Tone got a 4 for a total of 7. So not brilliant, actually, given the proficiency of Enterprise's dive bombers. Tone gets knocked around a little bit, but we're probably talking near misses and a lot of splinters rather than anything serious. So now let's get over to poor old Ryujo. The US dive bombers are going to go in first, and they get a +6. The Japanese only get a +1. The US rolled 7, so that's a total of 13. And the Japanese rolled a 4 for a total of 5. Okay, that's not lethal, but it's bad. The poor old Ryujo is flipped to her damaged side. So she probably takes several hits from that attack. And she's been left in a rather bad way just in time for the US torpedo bombers to come in and try and finish her off. Like their dive bombers, Torpedo 3 from the Enterprise represents a very proficient group. So they get a +6 because that's their attack rating. Poor Ryujo is down to a defense of 1. So here it comes. So the US rolls a 3 for a total of 9. Ryujo rolls a 4 for a total of 5. So that's pretty amazing. She takes another hit. She is in an extremely bad way and her speed is reduced, but she has somehow survived the combined efforts of 2 US carriers to put her down. I'd say that's a very impressive achievement. So I will gather these ships up. Whoops. So I can put them back on their task force display. I've got to say, well done, Ryujo. By all rights, you probably shouldn't have survived that. Also, my apologies, everyone. While I was busy conducting the attack, I'm afraid Admiral Oscar decided he really wasn't happy with the disposition of the Imperial Navy's ships, and he has decided to drastically change the formation. So he's actually sitting on the attack force box. So I regret that I can't actually put these ships back there yet, but I'll just kind of shift them under his leg there for now. Honestly, Oscar, you could just ask, buddy. Just look at him. Look at that face. I don't know. You could just tell me you don't like my dispositions and ask me to move them, but hey. But there we go. So the Japanese are, I won't say pleased. Pleased is too strong a word, but you know, their light carrier is still afloat, barely, when historically it would have been on its way to the bottom. So they've done well there, and they are about, because it is the last of the air attacks going in, they are about to exact their vengeance, because hovering over the Enterprise task group are 2 of their float planes guiding in a very large attack force from Shokaku and Zuikaku. So let's head for the battle map again. Enterprise can go there. Let's do another zoom in. I'll just try not to run over the rest of this. No, Oscar. No. I think we've had enough destruction and devastation for one day. Now, reflecting the different tactical approaches I'd mentioned in the previous video, the US, unlike the Japanese, grouped their ships much more tightly for anti-aircraft defense. And it does mean that more often than not, the US is able to inflict heavy losses on Japanese aircraft, with or without the help of a gigantic black cat. Who's no... Oi, Oscar, no, please. So that is the starting formation for the US ships. They don't have enough to cover everything, so poor old Enterprise has to have an open port quarter. But it's the best I can do with the ships I've got. The other thing that hobbles her slightly is that in this scenario, her anti-aircraft is treated as being 4 rather than 5. So they're just going to have to like it and lump it, I'm afraid. So, like their Japanese counterparts, the US didn't have any fighters available for a combat air patrol because they were busy being refueled at the time. But what I might do, just for the purposes of a demonstration, because I realize we haven't seen any fighter-to-fighter combat in this game, the way it works is if you have an incoming airstrike, if it's not escorted, then the defending fighters can just plow straight into the enemy formation. But because this one does have an escort, the US fighters face off against their Japanese opposite numbers there. Now, the benefit of this is at least it means that because they're busy tangling with the cap, those Japanese Zeros can't strafe and suppress like they would have been able to do. So let's just say Enterprise managed to get a lucky few Wildcats off. They're probably not going to have fun, though, because the way the rules lay out these combats, the escorting fighters always get a chance to jump the cap first. And these are Zuikaku's fighters, so they know what they're doing. They have an attack rating of 5 versus the Wildcats rating of 2. So in they come. And the Japanese have rolled a 4 for a total of 9. The US rolled 5 for a total of 7. So that could have been worse. In fact, it could have been a lot worse. So a few Wildcats go down in the initial slashing attack. But they now get a chance to get their own back. So they're going to counterattack their Japanese opposite numbers. They originally had an attack rating of 6, but it's gone down to 5 because of the damage. And the Japanese have a defensive rating of 2. So the US rolled a 4. And that gives them a that gives them a total of 9. The Japanese rolled an 8, and that gives them a total of 10. So oh, sorry, I lie. I think that was meant to be simultaneous. Sorry. So although the US is marked with a damage counter, they still get to fight at full strength. My bad. Sorry, everyone. Difficult to concentrate when you have a cat nudging you. So, yes, the US do lose a few planes. The Japanese don't lose any in return. But most importantly, the combat air patrol and the escorts are keeping each other busy. So now the Japanese aircraft come in. I'll try not to get my big, huge hand in the way. So we have 2 groups of dive bombers and 2 groups of torpedo bombers. Now, I am going to distribute the Japanese a bit because we really, really want to kill the Enterprise and exact some measure of vengeance for what has happened today. Now, to do this, one of the bomber groups is going to go in for an attack on the ship. The other one, because they can't resist a good battleship, is going to bomb the North Carolina. And the highly disciplined Japanese torpedo bombers are going to go for that dreaded anvil attack I described. So this presents the US with a bit of a dilemma. So in the interests of not keeping any attackers unfired at, the US is going to distribute its defensive fire as follows. The unengaged destroyers here are going to join with Enterprise to target the dive bombers. The Portland is going to shoot at that torpedo bomber group. The Atlanta is going to shoot at that torpedo bomber group. And the North Carolina will somewhat selfishly shoot at the dive bombers that are attacking her. So North Carolina, with her formidable anti-aircraft gun batteries of 6, versus those dive bombers with a defense of 1, she's going to blaze away. And the US rolls a 6, so that's 12 in total. The Japanese rolled a 3, which would normally mean that group of bombers was annihilated. However, in this battle, it's the Japanese who hold the free roll marker, and they're going to demand a re-roll. Ooh, and I don't know if they'll wish they hadn't. So the US rolled a 10 this time for the North Carolina for a total of 16. and the Japanese rolled a 5 for a total of 6. So it's a doubling with a bit of loose change. So at least half the incoming squadron are casualties, but they're still coming in and making their attack. Let's do Enterprise against those dive bombers next. So with her scenario rating of 4 plus the destroyers, it's an AA rating of 6 versus the Japanese defense rating of 1. Oh, the US has rolled a 1, so that's a 7 in total. And the Japanese have got a 6. So despite blazing away, Enterprise has not really managed to inflict many losses on those incoming bombers. I'm sorry for the constant changes in light, guys. Oscar's deciding he's going to walk up and down, and it's creating a little bit of a light issue. Oscar, you do have a sense of the dramatic, don't you? So, right, so that's the fire against those bombers. Now I'm going to do the Portland versus the first group of torpedo planes. Anti-aircraft rating of 2 versus a defense rating of 1. Oh, both sides rolled a 1, so the US have a 3 and the Japanese have a 2. Okay, a few planes go down, but not enough to worry the Japanese too much. And then we've got the Atlanta versus the other group of torpedo planes. AA rating of 3 versus a defensive rating of 1. Ooh, and the Yanks have rolled an 8. So that's an 11 versus a Japanese roll of 3. Okay. Had it been any higher, the Japanese would have been in trouble. But as it is, they just managed to avoid elimination, but they do suffer heavy losses. So that's that. The US have fired, and now the Japanese are going to come in and make their attacks. So, first group of Shokaku dive bombers are going to hit the North Carolina. They roll a 5, and their attack rating is 3, so that's an 8. The North Carolina is an absolute beast with a defensive rating of 8, and they roll a 7. So if any of those bombs hit, they do negligible damage, and the near misses certainly don't. And the Japanese bombers break away at this point. The next group of dive bombers is coming in over the Enterprise. Attack rating of 4 because they've been damaged versus Enterprise's defense rating of 3. Well, luck is with the US because the Japanese total was 9. They rolled a 5. The US rolled a 9. So they managed to evade all of the incoming bombs. That's incredible. So the Japanese dive bombers have not achieved a great deal. But now the Japanese torpedo bombers get to come in. For a bit of drama, let's do the weaker one first. So they get a +3 bonus because they're making an anvil attack. So it's an attack strength of 6 versus Enterprise's defense of 3. Oof, and the Japanese have rolled a 10 for 16. The US rolled a 5 for 8. So wham, several torpedoes slam into the Enterprise. And she is reduced to her damaged side. Meanwhile, these survivors scarp her, but it's just in time for the wildly maneuvering carrier to suddenly find another group of torpedo bombers coming in, and they have an attack rating of 5 versus her defense of 2. Oof. Now, the Japanese roll a 3, so that is 8. The US rolls a 4 for 6, so that is incredibly lucky. By all odds, that more intact group of torpedo bombers should have landed more hits, but they did not. So Enterprise is very badly battered. In fact, rather oddly, she's in the same state that Ryujo was in. But most importantly, she has survived the onslaught of Japanese aircraft. So what I do at this point is I gather up the survivors of the Japanese airstrike. along with their damage markers. That remains. And as I did with the US airstrikes earlier, I will, oh my goodness, Oscar, buddy, why? I will send these aircraft back to where I think the main Japanese fleet is, but where it probably isn't. And I'll gather up the US ships and return them to their appropriate holding box, again, along with their damage markers. I think it's safe to say after the thumping she's taken, in fact, the thumping both of them have taken, Enterprise and Ryujo are both pretty much out of this battle now. The hypothetical cap that I made up, just for the sake of demonstration, I'll put back on Enterprise's flight deck. I just realized something I'd forgotten. I should have given the Japanese dive bombers a bit of a bonus, because the Enterprise had fighters on her deck frantically refueling, and given that I gave the US some free fighters for cap without extending that courtesy to the Japanese, probably be fair if I... Rats, it's a bit too late to do a re-roll. But I think what I'll do is, just for fairness, is I'll flip that hit marker to 2 hits for the Enterprise. So Enterprise is actually dead in the water, which is not good. She can still be towed away by her escorts, and luckily one of her escorts is a hulking great battleship who could probably easily tow her. But her speed effectively has been reduced to 1. So they are going to be spending the rest of the game probably trying to limp, if not off map, then as far away from the Japanese as they can get. So that is it. That is the air phase completed. All the strikes have come in. Now, what would normally happen at this stage, and I say normally, that whopping great tail lying across my game board giving a sense of why this is becoming anything but normal. You would return all aircraft to their bases, those that were in range. The important one to remember with your scouting assets, strike assets always return as when this phase comes round, once all the air attacks are over. Scouting assets, if they're short-ranged, i.e. if they don't have a little star by their range rating, they go straight home as well. Also, any reconnaissance assets on their patrol side have reached the limit of their fuel endurance and have to return home. So I'll find all those that qualify and take them away. And then lastly, unless you want them to land, any aircraft, long-range aircraft, scouting ones that you want to stay in the air, are all flipped to their patrol side. So I'll just do that for pretty much every aircraft that's still in the air. All these Japanese long-range assets are going to be wanted for the next turn. So let's just turn you guys over. So that's it. Oh yes, and two of these were actually shadowing the Enterprise group. So with aerial observation, the US and the Task Force 16 USS Enterprises group is going to have a bit of a tough time getting away. The Japanese losses in that attack were heavy, but not so heavy that they won't be, failing to throw a follow-up in later. So that brings us to the end of the turn, except for one thing. If you're playing with the submarine attack optional rule, the end of the turn is when you check for submarine attack, and the mechanism's quite simple. You both roll off, and if one side beats the other by 3 or more, they get to launch a submarine attack. Thereafter, with that, you just consult a table and make a roll to see if the attack managed to destroy a target vessel. In this case, nothing has happened, so both sides breathe a sigh of relief there. So there we go. With apologies for the absolute chaos wrought by Felix the cat here. Yes, you. that was, I hope, a fairly sensible one-turn demonstration of how this game system works. Now, I am conscious that the only thing I didn't get a chance to show you was surface combat, but it's rather a difficult one to stage, simply because if the US picked a fight with Japanese forces in this context and in this period of the war, it would very likely not go well for them. So sensible play sort of demands that you shouldn't do this. But I can do you a quick demonstration, because let us assume, and I am sorry, Biggie, but let us assume that the Enterprise is so badly crippled that they've effectively abandoned her. This is what they call foreshadowing, I suppose. Much the same way Hornet was at the Battle of Santa Cruz. And let's also say that a Japanese surface force was able to find her. So let's say she's really unlucky and she was found in daylight by the Japanese battleship Hiei. So because it's daylight, Hiei sets up at the daylight line. And what happens first is you roll initiative to see who's side A and side B. The Japanese roll a 10, so they win that one and they're side A. If this had been a night action, they would have had a +3 bonus to their roll because of their night fighting capability. So what happens first is that side A compels side A compels side B to move first. But if we're treating Enterprise as abandoned, effectively, she's not going anywhere. But the Japanese will now move, realizing that they've got a completely helpless target. And they will then open up with their guns, because the next phase is firing your guns. Hiei has got A-rated guns, so your surface gunnery factor is that number there, and the alphabetical reference is how powerful they are. A is the heaviest guns. She doesn't have torpedoes, so there's going to be no torpedoing. So A guns have a range of 6 hexes, but because she is firing out of her bow arc, she's actually no, she won't bother turning. She is just going to move 1 hex to make sure Enterprise is still in her A arcs. And she's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Enterprise is at reasonably long range, but still within range of Hiei's guns. Her defensive rating is basically 0 because of the amount of damage she's taken. So the Japanese are going to roll and add 4. Enterprise is just going to roll. Oof, the Japanese rolled a 10 and Enterprise rolled 4. So given the disparity there, in this scenario, poor old abandoned Enterprise just takes the hit and goes straight down. And that was probably one of the quickest demonstrations of a surface action that I've done. But I wanted to get that in. I've been wondering how to go about doing it. And I'd been wondering how to engineer a situation before the gigantic black cat came and wrought the havoc that he did. Sorry about that, guys. He is actually still here looking mightily pleased with himself. So there we go. That was surface action. Now, obviously, if you have a big clash like the Battle of Friday the 13th or the naval battle of Guadalcanal a couple of days later, it can get rather epic. But I really just wanted to show you the basics and just to give you a very quick idea of what the relationship is between the gunnery ratings, where it's A through to D for gun sizes, and the armor ratings, where it's A through to D for armor effectiveness again. And there's not anything that you particularly have to memorize, because on the battle boards, there is a very handy set of tables, not just showing you how to what to add or subtract depending on the situation, but also a conversion table for what to apply when you've got heavy guns firing at weak armor or vice versa. So I think I'll call a halt there because the battle would have been interesting if I'd been able to carry it on, but I think it's been decisively ended by a force of nature. So I hope that that's been a useful demonstration overall of how this game goes. Up to about 2 minutes ago, I was really enjoying myself. I mean, to be fair, I was still enjoying myself, but it's a pity the cat decided to do what he did. But yes, I hope that you have enjoyed this too and found it interesting. And in terms of demonstrating how this game works, I hope it's helped those of you who might be looking for it to make up your minds as to whether it's a game system you would like to get into or not. But again, I have had the greatest fun making it. And I just wanted to end, as I always do, by saying thank you guys so much for the pleasure of your company. It's always great having you along for the ride here, and I really appreciate the comments and the feedback, as always. A big hello to my eternally suffering veterans who put up with a lot. Always a pleasure to catch you guys, and to anyone who might be new to my channel, it's not always this disastrous. The cat does show up from time to time, but very rarely does he reorganize fleets to such a degree, or disorganize them, I should say. But if it is the Avalon Hill and Smithsonian joint effort games that brought you here, then you're very welcome. I hope you've enjoyed this video series. And if it's wargaming in general, then again, huge welcome to you. Please do have a meander around the channel, and I hope that you find other things that you like. But in any case, guys, thank you so much once again. And Oscar's come to say a quick thank you and goodbye too. Do you want to say bye, Oscar? Say bye to everyone? You don't want to? Okay, that's fine. Yep, been real pleasure seeing you guys again. Thank you so much as always, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.